If we have an engine fire and we're in the air, most people will freak out. We don't. It's the complete opposite. We literally do nothing.
Flying by the seat of your pants is not good advice, especially not when it comes to real estate investing or flying a commercial plane. Today's guest, Satch Bernhardt, is an expert in both, and during our conversation, he exposes the illusion of job security that many people fall victim to. He shares some of the surprising ways being an airline pilot prepared him for real estate investing. Strap in. We're about to take a one-way trip to several real estate revelations you won't be able to unsee. The COVID pandemic wasn't the only time that airline pilots really were exposed to the vulnerability of their career.
I think many other industries as well, right? But like 9/11 hit the airlines pretty hard. 2008 hit the airlines pretty hard, and they're so susceptible to. Obviously, 9/11 is pretty obvious, right? There was an airplane that crashed into a building, but like 2008, right? Whenever anything in the market that fluctuates with oil and gas, the airlines obviously use fuel to operate, right? And whenever those prices fluctuate, it really affects them, the bottom line. So the two things that are the most expensive on an airline are the pilots and the fuel. So whenever any of those two start fluctuating, things can get really bad for the industry. And that's just as far as I've gone that I've known from like I guess the time that I have been alive. But I'm pretty sure that before 2001, there's been many periods of times where, I mean, other airlines have gone bankrupt, other airlines have shut down, right? And many pilots have been affected because of that.
So you were wholesaling and flipping, and my brothers and I actually also got our start there as well. We were flipping, we flipped some houses. We're still doing that on the side, and we were running a wholesaling operation before multifamily. You did eventually scale that, and I don't know if you're still doing that now, but in the past, I've heard you discuss scaling that, and I imagine you had to an extent, remove yourself from that. And I think there's definitely some lessons we can learn from the challenges you encountered as you were scaling that single family operation. So can you just share some of that with us?
We got to 31 team members when we were at the highest number of team members, and the entire goal was to remove myself from the company, right? And I started implementing the processes that we have at the airlines, right? So when you fly, think about this, right? When you are about to get on an airplane, there's so many things that are going on behind the scenes that most passengers don't pay attention to, right? But when an airplane pulls up to the gate, the rampers come to the airplane, they start unloading the bags, people get off, and then the cleaners come on board, start cleaning the airplane. Maintenance shows up, they do a walk around, make sure they do all their checks. The pilots are on the front, they're doing all the flight tests and everything they need to do to perform the next flight. From the moment that the door opens, we have 24 minutes to get the plane ready to go and pushed off the gate, right? So like the time starts ticking, and the fueler shows up, the fueler starts putting fuel on the plane. Now new passengers come on board, they get on, new bags come on board, and then in less than 24 minutes that plane starts pushing off, right? And all of those things happen with minimum interaction from all of the crews that are operating that flight. And seeing that synergy of people working together, it doesn't matter where the airplane is, right? If the airplane is in Mexico, Canada, or anywhere in the US, is always the same way. So using that thought process is how I started scaling the business, right? Okay, my thought process was, if anybody in my company does not show up today, can anyone else come and replace them, sit on their seat, and perform the entire duties that that person does in one day without having to talk to anyone? That's how I approached every single role, right? So I have KPIs, I had their roles and responsibilities, checklists of what they're supposed to do, and then an expanded checklist on what each one of those items was, SOPs on how to do it, videos. And that was a way to scale the company, right? In that way, it doesn't matter. It was a company built on systems that was not dependent on people, right? It was dependent on systems, and systems rarely fail because it's the same thing over and over, regardless of who's the person executing those systems. So that was the essence of scaling the business the right way.
You had scaled the single family business enough so that you could focus more attention and energy on that multifamily initiative you were starting. What was the point of that if you were making, you were seeing success as a single family investor? I know the answer, but I imagine there's people wondering what was the point, and yeah, what was your motive if not money?
Two things. One, I was never really passionate about the wholesaling business. In fact, I hated that model, right? So much. And I was more so um, the first reason why I started that business was because I was protecting myself, right? It was based out of fear, right? I was trying to protect myself in case the airline ever shut down, and that was my initial motive to start that business. Didn't really give much thought to other industries or anything like that. I just knew you had to be in real estate, and I thought that was the easiest thing, right? And um, and then the reason why I started growing it was because I wanted to test myself, put myself to the challenge to know, improve myself that I could do it. It's a wrong business to scale. It's so hard, dude. It's so complex, right? If you've done wholesale deals, there's like so many moving pieces, and the deal can fall through at any point in the transaction. So it's such a hard business to scale. But I just was just doing it to prove myself. But I got to a point where I was not aligning myself with the service that we were providing. I legitimately did not believe inside of me that most sellers were better off wholesaling their houses over putting their houses on the market. And I really need to, and you may relate to this, right? I really need to be passionate about what I'm doing. And if not, it just becomes so miserable, right? It's horrible. Like, well, you're waking up and you're doing something just for money. It's just like, what's the goal? What's the point of that, right? And so that is, once I scale it and I start having all this free time, part of me was like, okay, well, if I'm making this kind of money every month, I can just, it's a cash flowing business. I can just leave it running. And my real mission with multifamily, I did have, I'm passionate about that business, right? I was using the same service of multifamily investing in syndications when I was making my money from wholesaling business. I was shoving that money into syndications as a limited partner, right? So I've used the service that we provide, right? I've never used a wholesaling service, right? And it's like, it's a service that is very unique for a certain amount of people, right? But I feel aligned with the multifamily service that we provide limited partners because I use it myself, right? That's a way that I invest. And I recognize that that service could be very useful for other pilots as well, so that they could build their passive income, because many of them don't have the desire to go out and do what we do, right? And be active investors and find deals and build a company and put systems in place and scale. Many of them don't have any desire to do that, and that's perfectly fine. And being a passive investor fits really well for those people. And so I really feel the mission and the passion for that business.
I can absolutely relate to that feeling about wholesaling. We weren't passionate about it. It was very much, super transactional. And so that was one of the reasons we decided to pursue multifamily. But I do appreciate wholesaling, and I'm aware for me personally, and I'd love to know how you can relate to this. Wholesaling taught me the foundations of real estate investing, and it was a great, I've heard it referred to as the gateway drug to real estate. So, what foundational principles about real estate did single family investing and wholesaling teach you about that you maybe eventually applied to multifamily?
I think a lot of them. Sales is a very big one. Although I don't use sales to the extent that we were using sales in wholesaling. If you were to put a number, I'll say wholesaling sales was the number 10 in raising capital is probably number 2 or 3, right? Uh, and the other thing is just comes with the technical terms and stuff that as it involves doing a rehab on a property, right? If you've done plenty of house flips, you can look at a multifamily underwriting and assess whether those assumptions for the capex make sense or not, right? If you're looking at how much renovations they're going to do to a unit, you can determine like, yeah, those numbers make sense, or these guys are completely underestimating how much it's going to take to do the renovations that they want to do, right? And that's mostly on my side, since I focus mostly on the capital side, right? I'm not an operator, so I mostly go in and I start uh, picking away at what the sponsor is already put in place, right? So that's part of my due diligence process. So that's probably one of the bigger ones. Really understanding how every transaction works, from getting a lender to putting the business plan to underwriting. The underwriting is much more complex from a single family home to a multifamily deal, but some of the essence stuff in an underwriting still apply, right? And um, and I'll say maybe another thing will be like backtracking from where you need to be. A lot of people that are not in real estate, they think that the price that people are selling their homes, or the price that something is advertised at, that's the prices they need to buy it, and they try to make it work based on those numbers, right? To us as investors, we look at the number and we don't even look at it, right? We're like, whatever. We're going to run our numbers and we're going to backtrack it and see how much we can offer you, right? Because we're going to build our business plan and then figure out how much is it that we can pay based on how much work we're going to do to the property, and then determine how much is it that we can pay.
Yeah, it's like you have that set criteria, and then you try to see if the deal makes sense in the context of your criteria instead of trying to manipulate your criteria to make the deal make sense. Yeah. I'm aware that there are probably a few transferable skills that you have taken from your career as an airline pilot and you're now applying in your real estate. How have you applied that ability to navigate under pressure, and how has that been applied to real estate investing for you?
You bring up a very good point, and the way we deal with emergencies in the air is probably completely different than how many people react in like a, say when you're negotiating or something doesn't go according to the plan. One of the things that we learn from flying is to remain calm, right? And really look at the situation objectively, and try to use all of our resources, um, and just really taking some time to think things through, right? Which you will think, for example, if we have an engine fire and we're in the air, most people will freak out, right? And then they will start running around and try to, like, they think that if we're in the front, we'll start flipping switches and going crazy and doing something to fix it, but we don't. It's the complete opposite. We just we literally do nothing, right? The first thing is do nothing and really just fly the plane, because that's the most important thing, right? So when it comes to an emergency or a problem that you face in real estate, which happens a lot, it's like just sit back and think, right? Many times, many people react, and it just makes the situation worse because you bring emotion into the equation, and now instead of smoothing things out with whoever is the other party involved, now you're just causing more friction. The other person is now feeling hurt, and now things are not going really well, right? So that would be a big thing that transfers from flying, is remaining calm. And
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes before you take off on a flight. And I imagine as an airline pilot, you're very detail oriented. And I know as a multifamily investor, it's important to be detail oriented, especially when you're doing your due diligence on the underwriting or even visiting the property and trying to determine, is this going to make sense for my investors? So, can you expand on that detail orientation and how that is applied to your role in real estate and multifamily?
I have a checklist of items, right, that I go through, which, I mean, it's a checklist, right? I have to be, it's a checklist guy. So I have an item checklist, and I don't let emotion get in the way of anything, right? And to me, it's all just based on, does the deal meet this criteria that I have laid out for myself? And if it does, then cool. It's a good deal, right? But if it doesn't, then it's not a good deal. Then one of the things I tell my investors is, uh, for me, it's something I've learned from Warren Buffett, is it's he never feels the pressure to make a deal just to make a deal for him to, like, keep the lights on and meet payroll, right? It's like, I can is investing is the only sport in which you don't have to bat and you won't get sent to the bench, right? I can sit here all day and I can be pitched deals from different sponsors and I don't have to choose it, none of them, right? And it doesn't matter to me, uh, to try to squeeze a deal that is like barely marginal according to my own criteria just to make a deal happen, right? I can sit here all day and go on an entire year without picking a deal at all, and I'll be okay. Um, so that's one of my things, that I've applied and I've come to do to let my investors know that, hey, I follow a I follow my checklist and I follow a certain parameters and I don't get emotional. If we don't do a deal, then we don't do a deal, right? It's better to, we say in flying, we say it's better to be on the ground wishing you were in the air than being in the air wishing you were on the ground, which translates to it's better to do no deal than doing a bad deal, right? And so same process, right? And so one of my things right now is, right, we only focus in Texas and Florida. uh, that doesn't mean that other states are not good. It's just that I personally only focus on those two states because I focus in areas that I really know, and it's something I recommend to other investors. Right, if you're looking at a deal as a passive investor, invest with a sponsor group that invests in that same area that you like and because you will be able to tell about that market more than someone else that is not from there. Right.
100%. And that reminds me of a story. Once I was on a small plane, and we were going from one island to the mainland, and there was a storm, and it was a short 20-minute flight, but there was a storm, so there was thunder, and the entire plane was shaking, and it was a small one. And I it just didn't seem like like there was a chance. I was praying, my heart was racing, and I look over to the pilot, and he's just relaxed, even though there's a really big gray cloud consuming us, lightning is striking right next to us, very terrifying. But I think that exemplifies that ability to navigate uncertainty and like just really lean into any challenge you encounter and remaining objective, like you were saying. Now, I did want to kind of tie that into my next point, which is the backup plan that you touched on before this call. You said you guys always have an alternative airport. How does that tie into that mindset of being able to overcome challenges and navigate the turbulence of real estate?
I always say that always have an alternate airport, right? And which translates to, when people have a W-2 job, um, you use something else that you can have readily available in case your job doesn't turn out as well, right? Many people get furloughed. Many people, their companies shut down. You never know. Your job is not secure, right? We fall under that uh, uh, false thinking that our job is secure. Many people told me, like when I first started in real estate, um, the thought of completely quitting flying crossed my mind a few times, even though I didn't really want to. I love flying, but I thought, what if I just completely quit flying and I just did real estate full time? And many people will tell me like, no, don't quit flying. That's your secure job. That's the thing that will last forever. And sure enough, right, it ended up shutting down in 2020. Right, my secure job is the thing that failed. So I wouldn't never consider a W-2 job a secure job. They can always let you go, right? They can always let you go. And in fact, some of the bigger companies, they purposely look for that. They purposely look there comes a certain time of the year that they're looking for what kind of employees can we let go and reduce the cost, right? And that's just the way it is, right? That's the way corporate works, and it's all about the numbers, and it's all about the bottom line, right? So always have something else to fall back on, whether that you want to start a business or you want to become a passive investor. Figure out what is it that your skills are best suited for, and how much time you have available. Another thing to consider is how much money you're making, right? For someone that is a professional making $500,000, 700, a million bucks a year, it might not make much sense for them to go and become an active investor, because their time is better spent on whatever they are already doing, because it's pretty good income, right? So there's a learning curve to doing all this, right? If you want to become an active investor. So uh, if doing this full time is not really their passion or something they want to do, then becoming an active investor might not be the best way to go, right? Someone that is making $50,000 a year in their job and they don't like it, then for them it might make sense to become an active investor and figuring out, right, that their runway is much longer. They have much availability to make more income becoming an active investor than staying at the job that they don't like, making 50 grand a year.
Something that comes to mind when you say that is I know a lot of people who even we fell for this and fell into this misstep, that when you get into real estate, it's easy to forget to set clear goals and have a clear destination. And as an airline pilot, I mean, you don't just get into a plane and go. You typically have a destination or somewhere you intend to get to. So how does that apply? How does having a clear goal or destination help inform your investment decisions in real estate?
When I started the first business, it was all about driving profits and driving revenue and making more money. And one day I'm sitting with my business coach and he says, "Hey, Satch, why are you doing all this?" And I'm kind of like, "What do you mean, right? The point is to make money, right? Like, and freedom, right?" I say, "Well, I want freedom." And he says, "You want freedom? You don't want freedom." And I say, "Yeah, I want freedom." He says, "If you want freedom, sell all of the stuff that you own and go live in the park. You're free, right? Get rid of all your bills. You don't have anything to pay. You don't have no responsibilities. You're free." And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't want that, right?" And it's like, what you really want is to create the ability to create those memories with the people that you love, right? At one point, once you become financially free and you have all the time in the world to do whatever you want, trust me, you will go to the beach and you can only do that for so long and drink so many margaritas before you're like, okay, well, what's next, right? You get bored and you want a purpose. Everyone in life wants a purpose, right? To do something. So in managing that purpose of whatever you're doing in life, you have to also align those memories that you want to create with your loved ones, right? What those things should come in your as a priority, right? They should fall on your calendar first. I'm gonna do these things with my family. This is what we're gonna do. This is the experience we want to do, and this is the memories that we want to create. And then you should form your lifestyle around that, right? And so that's the big thing that I always bring up when I talk about flight plan, because the reason to think about that is so that you know how much passive income you need, right? And that way you're not aimlessly just working your butt off to make money without a real purpose or ending goal, right? You have to set your flight plan. I'm gonna make this much money for this many years so that I can invest this much, so that I can have this much cash flow, and that way we can start having this much free time with my family, so that we can go and do this experience and this and this and this, right? And having all that laid out and having your family come on board and seeing all that, and everybody getting on the same flight plan with you just makes things so much easier, right? As opposed to just like aimlessly just starting doing things and with no end in sight, right?
Lifestyle freedom was such a motivating factor for us, and it still is. And I agree, it's so important to just have that clarity with yourself. It not only can help you make sure you're on track, but it'll also keep you motivated on that journey. So that's so important.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And as far as me goes, as far as like my investing criteria, um, I'm not so I'm still flying and I make pretty good money doing that. So I don't really my cash flow that I receive from my investments is about a third of my monthly expenses, and I could have more, but purposely I have invested in deals where there's not much cash flow, and I'm more so looking for the rapid appreciation on the money so that I can uh, uh, later on invest in deals where cash flow will be much greater. But right now, at this stage, I'm not looking for that, and so that's why it's that way, right? But once I have attained all that rapid appreciation that goes with that, then I'm gonna start changing the assets in which I'm investing that money in as a passive investor and start getting more cash flow instead.
But there's clearly an intentionality you have in your approach to investing. Like you said earlier, you backtrack it. So you're saying have a certain goal for this investment, and therefore that's why you're investing in these certain kinds of deals. And I think a lot of people will just look at multifamily deals in general as, oh, they're all the same, so it doesn't really matter what I invest in. But I know for a fact there's certain operators and sponsors who will have certain deals that are tailored towards a particular investor, whether that's one that's motivated more by cash flow or another one that wants more of a wealth appreciation play, one that's more risk averse, or one that's more willing to take more risk if they're younger and looking to expand their wealth faster. So that's just really cool that there's so many different facets, even within something as already niche as multifamily syndications and multifamily.
100%. Yeah. So as a passive investor, you should really uh, uh, find the sponsors that are looking to do the type of deals that that meet your investment goals, right? And that way you guys have the same mindset, and you can really attain whatever you goals you want to do, right? So it will change from there's some markets where you might be able to buy some properties. If you're targeting like a class C, could be a property that you can add a lot of value to it, doing some heavy renovations, and then you can attain a lot of appreciation on those properties, right? So you can multiply your capital a little faster. Buying a nicer newer properties like class A, there might not be that much that much. And it also depends, right? Because it all comes down to like how you buy it, and purchase price and all that, right? How much appreciation you can get on the property. But the amount of renovations you can do to a property may be a little bit more limited than a class C or a class B, right?
A little bit of a pivot, but on a previous interview, I've heard you discuss the polarization between two particular kinds of pilots that you've encountered along your time of just raising capital and working in multifamily. And I've seen that among my peers, among the investors that we've worked with as well. Some people are more motivated by acquiring toys, and others that are more interested in investing and acquiring wealth. And so, my next question is kind of twofold. One, what would you say to someone who is actually interested more so in getting those toys right now? And also to add on that, is there anything wrong with wanting those toys, in your opinion?
I don't know if I will say there's something wrong, because it just depends on people's. I don't know. Have you read the book The Psychology of Money? Okay, so it's a great book. Highly recommend it for everyone. But so one of the premises is that we all think about money differently depending on when we were born, because just about every decade that we go through has such an impact on our lives. Like for example, you and I, Kerwin, I think you're probably like 10 years younger than me, but um, you were born. I was born in '92. You're probably born like close to the 2000s, right? And inflation has never really been a topic for us in our lifetime until recent years, right? And but so we really never thought much of it. But other people in different generations, inflation has been a big deal, right? So there's certain topics in the economy that affects people differently depending on how they were raised. Maybe you've heard your grandparents talk about puts money in your savings account so that it can make you money, but dude, the savings accounts don't make money anymore, right? So it's pointless. But they still have the mindset, because that's when they grew up. Putting money in the savings accounts was generating a pretty decent return for them. So things change as we go through life, and people get a different experience. So many of the pilots that I talked to them, as to where to me it may seem crazy to spend money on toys before you set yourself for success with passive investments. To them, they look at me as in like, dude, life is short, right? We're all gonna die. Let's just enjoy it, right? Let's have some good time. So they think I'm the crazy one, right? And where I'm thinking like, dude, I don't know how you can live thinking like that, right? So it's not so much that I wouldn't put someone down for like, oh, the
Yeah.
way you're thinking is wrong, but I wish I wish they will maybe not do that first, because there's always going to be an opportunity for them to make pretty good money in the airlines. And I literally talked to a guy that I was like, hey man, we're doing this is what we're doing in the multifamily space. If you're ever interested, happy to talk to you more about that. And he's like, nah, dude, I don't care. All I care about is buying more cars. And he showed me some photos of some cars, like very expensive cars. And I was like, all right, whatever, dude. Um, so I don't know. It's just different ways of thinking, right? And different lifestyles.
Yeah, I know Ken McElroy. He's the author of the ABCs of Real Estate. He talks about how it's not bad to want those toys, the nice car, the nice house, but those are liabilities, and it's important to understand the difference between a liability and an asset, and using the cash flow from your assets to buy your liabilities instead of using your active income to buy liabilities. So it's really just like you said, having that delayed gratification and also being willing to wait and maybe not doing it in that order. So I mean, of course, this isn't financial advice, but these are really wise people in yourself. You guys definitely are sharing wisdom.
No, you hit the nail on the head, man. That for you and me, that's the way we think of it, right? But there's some people that they just don't. And
I've heard in the past, flying private is more dangerous, and you're more likely to get into a plane crash than flying on commercial airlines. And I just was wondering, no worries if you can't, but is there any parallel that you would see?
in general, between like if you think of any other mode of transportation, right? Going on train, cars, bicycles, motorcycles versus flying commercially. Flying commercially is the safest mode of transportation, right? And the reason for that is it's or ever since for the entire history of aviation, there's been very rigorous um, studies on every accident that happens to really prevent it from occurring again, right? And they will come in, they will dissect every single part of the flight, what went wrong, and they uh, they 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 discover that in every flight that that turned into an accident or an incident, there was just never, it was never just one thing that went wrong. It was a series of events put together that eventually led to the accident, which they resemble they call it the Swiss cheese holes, right? They line up. You ever seen the, you know, this the Swiss cheese, right? It has all these holes, and so like if you put them all in a certain pattern, then you can make all the holes line up, right? So that's what they use that as a symbol for an accident where all of the things just happen to go wrong, and
Mm.
then they eventually get to the accident, right? And so the way the airlines are built to help things, I don't want to scare you, but things go wrong in every flight, right? Like in every single flight you get on, there's at least something that goes wrong. And but because the systems are built so well between checklists, policies, procedures, automations, everything, it's like barriers in between these slices of the Swiss cheese that help prevent them from lining up, right? So as to whether one pilot missed to push a button, there's a checklist later down the road that will direct them to push the button, right? Or there will be a policy that will prevent them from getting into a place where if they miss something, they would turn into an accident, right? So there's all these barriers built in that eventually prevent anything from turning into a catastrophe. And if you study real estate, is in the same way, right? Like if you go and look at deals that went wrong, it wasn't just because they got the wrong terms on the loan. It was the wrong terms on the loan. The sponsor wasn't very experienced. They bought the property in an area they shouldn't have bought it. They were they didn't have the systems in place to operate a property like that, right? So it was not just the loan; it was all the other things combined that put together led to the bad outcome of that specific deal. So if in a company, even as a passive investor, you can build the systems for yourself, right? As a passive investor and an active operator, you can build these barriers from policies, manuals, checklists, automations, external resources, to build these systems and these barriers to prevent you from doing bad deals. And then you remove any sort of emotion that you have on any deal and just follow your systems to lead you to do the right deal, right? And so that's something that is pretty big, that I took from the airlines, and I said, you know what if I can find something that is why the reason why airlines don't crash, and then figure out a way to make a deal that doesn't go south, right?
That was a great way to connect that, and I can totally see that. That makes so much sense, and I also thought of the levers. I know a lot of times people will have, like, whether that's a value add play they can do. There's levers that you can pull to control the otherwise uncontrollable factors in a deal. I know you really respect Blackstone. We also really look up to them, and Blackstone has $41.196 billion in assets as of 2021, according to Wikipedia. How has Blackstone's success influenced your vision for your business and just the aspirations you have in this industry?
I think I'll separate them in two different categories. One is Blackstone, that just looking at how massive they are is almost hard to even comprehend, right? And so yeah, that seems, for anyone looking at it, just seems very scary, right? It's like, dude, how can even anybody get to that point? But then what really inspires me the most is Steven Schwarzman, right? Who, if you read the story, if you read the book, is he will even tell you, like, dude, I'm not smarter than anybody else. I've never even taken an economic class in my life. He's just really good at putting teams and people together to execute, and he will drive for big goals. If the constant theme that happens in the book, if you remember, is he's constantly looking for how can I set this big next goal, right? Like he wants to do an event, and he wants it to be the best event that will have the most impact, so that people will have like the best time, and it will really drive people's enthusiasm and drive to make this event good, right? And that's how he's able to do everything in his life, to where he looks for the things that will make the most impact. Where will people find the most that they will feel the most inspired by the goal that we're trying to make, and he drives people to him, right? He attracts them. And so that's one of my biggest takeaways from Steven.
Yeah.
how it's not so much about knowing the intricacies about like investing, which I mean obviously is pretty important, but when you're trying to build a big organization like that, it's attracting the right people in the right seats to feel inspired by the overall mission of the company. And don't being and being not being afraid to fail. He'll tell you, right, like he's failed many times and just keeps going, and those people that keep going are the ones that will succeed.
100%. One of my most memorable takeaways and stories that he shared in that book was when I can't remember what university it was at. It was an Ivy League. I want to say Yale, but I might be wrong. And he was at undergrad there, and there was a policy in place that you couldn't have women in the dorms, so it was all men's campus at the time. And of course, most students, I'm sure like generations of students had gone through never thinking to challenge that, and he challenged it. Eventually, succeeded in getting rid or amending that rule. And so that got him the attention of a secret society on campus. It elevated him in the social scene of one of the most prestigious universities, which I'm sure has had many benefits along throughout his entire career in terms of his network and the connections he's been able to make. And so I think that connects well with the quote that I was going to read to you. It's as easy to do something big as it is to do something small. So reach for a fantasy worthy of your pursuit with rewards commensurate with your effort. So how have you managed to think big in your own business and approach to real estate? And what challenges have you encountered as a result of that tendency to think big?
Dude, I love that quote as well. I think I even made a post about it. And I think it keeps on reappearing on my life because every time I get to a point when I was starting doing the wholesaling business, for example, a few years into it, I'm like, dude, this is not big enough. This is such a small pond, right? That um, it will take the same amount of effort to continue. In fact, probably even harder to scale and grow this complex business as it will take me to move into the multifamily space and do deals there. And the profits in a multifamily deal are much larger. So the reward is much larger in multifamily for um, what appears to be less complexity in every single transaction, right? So those are just that was a big awakening moment to me, right? I try to look for that, and when I read that quote, I was like, what am I doing right now that I could be doing something different in a somewhat similar space that going bigger will yield me better rewards for less work, right? And that was my answer right there. And even then, I mean, I think at some point you kind of have to like just really just decide what is it that you want to do, right? Because I was just having a conversation the other day with this gentleman who owns he's the CEO of a company. They manage and lease aircraft, and he's taken two companies public. This is the third company that he started, and he just finished a raise for $200 million, $240 million, and he was talking about it very nonchalant. You know, for us, imagine raising $240 million. That's a big deal, right? And he was just like, yeah, we just finished a raise, $240 million, and I was like, what? And for not for real estate, right? It's for his own
Mhm.
business on the aircraft leasing and management, and he's like, yeah, he's like, the way you're doing raising capital from like individual investors is so hard. You know, he's like, I will never even attempt that. He says, "Dude, once you go past, once your goal is to raise $100 million plus for an individual project, I mean, it just becomes so much easier, right?" So he's like, it's backwards, right? Once you go to try to raise that larger amount, and your business plan is sound and solid, and you have the track record to prove that you can do what you're trying to do, institutions will start throwing money at you, and it becomes so much easier to an institution, big institution will prefer to give you $100 million than to give you $10 million, right? It's much easier, and there's less questions to ask. You know, they expect less returns than the normal investor. You know, and like he says, the way you're doing it is like swimming uphill, right? And not that this changed my mind on what I'm my goal, but it just gave me another perspective on going even bigger, right? This guy is telling me over here he's already on a bigger I guess level, I guess, if you want to think about it, right, from a racing capital perspective. And And for you and me, right, sitting where we are, we're like trying to raise capital from investors and provide great returns. But it's obviously, we all know that there's a lot of an educational piece component that many of the investors that we bring are not aware of how things work. So we have to educate them a lot on what we're doing, how it works, the way the risk protections that we have in every deal. So it's not as easy as the way he's raising money from an institution at that level, right? So that just gave me another eye opener into Stephen's quote on it's not only is it more rewarding to go bigger, but it's also easier than what we're trying to do, right? But that's what I'm saying. At some point, you kind of have to stop and like looking at the other places, because then there's always somebody going to be doing something bigger and that will be much easier and whatever, right? So I don't know. I don't know what you take on that. On like, when do you stop and when do you keep chasing the next thing, right? The one thing I have for everyone to learn more about syndications and how we structure deals, you can go to wealthypilot.net, and I have a free ebook there where people can download. I'm also very active on social media, so just shoot me a text on literally any of the platforms, and I'll respond and we can chat.